Well, welcome everybody to the CropScan Ag webinar here today, looking at the precision ag strategies around managing variable rate nitrogen across a landscape. So CropScan Ag has been running some training sessions going from West Coast to East Coast, so from WA through to New South Wales earlier on in the year, and really stepping through some of that journey on utilising the CropScan data and linking that in with the protein and yield data as well to try and work towards making variable rate prescription maps. But as follow on from that, I thought there's nothing better than to have some real live examples. And obviously a number of people are aware of what Broden Holland has been doing with utilising protein towards that prescription creation for variable rate nitrogen. But he's also got a greater story to tell around his whole precision ag management. So thought no better than to bring Broden in here himself to tell a little bit about his story and his journey towards that precision ag. So welcome and thanks for coming on onto this webinar, Broden. I thought it'd be a great opportunity. We've got people from all around the world here on this call that maybe just set the scene on Kulpari Enterprises and where you're located and what you're sort of up to.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, it's good to be here and share the story and hopefully help someone who's trying to get into PA and maybe make it a bit easier. So we're at Young, New South Wales, in Australia, obviously. 4,300 hectares, family farm. Pop started with half of a half share of 640 acres, so it's grown a little bit. And yeah, we've got 4 full-time employees, so 2 other full-time apart from me and Dad. We crop about 4,400 hectares a year, and that's mostly wheat canola. We've got about 600 hectares of Aleutian clover pasture, which is probably moving towards more a high-density legume pasture, so want just a quick bit of N and then get it out. We've got 5,000 wethers still. We just moved from all ewes to wethers. 10-year rotation, 8 years wheat, 2 years canola, and then 2 years of pasture. The caveat, I suppose, looking at all this today is we are full VR, so we've done all our like gypsum, so for our pH and P, our sulfur, we've tried to get all those main levers up. So that's sort of making sure our base is right, but I guess our N is where we've been getting our biggest bang for our buck. But yeah, and then this year we're trying some favour beans, so that'll be interesting. Well, it's already been pretty interesting, but yeah, they're gonna be good. It's gonna be very interesting to see how they go. So we wanted to make this pretty informal, Ed. So I think, yeah, well, the group chat's open there, guys. So please write a message. The boys are looking at them, so they'll butt in anytime and tell me to answer a question or read out the question. So please do that, because we want to sort of tailor this to your needs. You know, we've harped on about this stuff for a fair while, and I know I have. So I want to sort of more help people rather than just share our story. Yeah, so and Ed also just butt in anytime and give me some questions, but I'll sort of just go through a brief rundown of what we do and how we've sort of done it, and then
I think that's great, Broden, and I think everyone's. I think it's just good to sort of break it down on where that journey's come from, and maybe even over the last few years. Like when did you start variable rate, and what was your first lever and decision process around going down the variable rate road?
Yeah, so 2016, Dad went to a spa event in West Wyalong, I think, or tomorrow, and yeah, we saw a protein monitor, CropScan protein monitor, getting advertised there, and thought, shit, let's blend some wheat with that. So we bought it for blending, and then pretty quickly we realized we could spread our urea based off that, because protein and nitrogen are very heavily correlated. So yeah, we started spreading variable rate, and in that same year we also started doing some 2-hectare grid sampling, which I've got a couple of slides there just to show some background context.
So you've got a bit of soil type variability, or are you considered pretty uniform and it's more the management that varies, or constraints and that sort of thing?
It's probably the managed. Yeah, 3 years ago I would have said we were pretty even, but now that we're getting things even. We're starting to see a few little areas that just more probably just heavier stuff that gets a bit sodic or we're not near as sodic as say further west, but we just have these areas that get a bit more waterlogged, and usually a bit of gypsum or something will fix them. But 9 times out of 10 it's just N. There's a block we were spreading yesterday, and I added it up, one little 3 hectare patch because it had manure last year and not much urea because of the manure. We do have manure variable rate, and that patch of canola is getting 600 kilos of urea versus most of the rest of it's getting 350.
Okay.
But it was only 3 hectares, so.
And your decision, what's your decision making around the variable rate? You're obviously doing that. Variable rate manure. Like, you're obviously doing that variable rate. Other people have sort of usually choose a blanket rate depending on where you are, but you've been able to variable rate that. What sort of decision making sort of led you to that?
By no means is it the most accurate thing to do, because of the inconsistencies of manure, but it's the cheapest source of P for us at the moment, and we can get it. So we're just using the manure to lift our P levels, and we're just aiming for 55 cobble P or whatever we can get to at the moment with enough manure. And then we're just using our MAP at sowing time, just blanket, just for maintenance pretty much. So this last 3 years we've mined that pretty hard, but just how it goes.
So you did like grid testing to pick that up first?
Yeah.
So grid soil testing.
If I show you here that we grid sampled, we've done the whole farm, and we're going back now and just sort of doing a couple of blocks a year, the same again. Very costly, but geez, you might as well put it where it's got to be. There's not much point in overfeeding areas, and the trouble with doing manure, like there's so much N in the manure, so we don't want to overfeed areas and waste the N. So that's a pH. So the first one there, if people aren't watching, but we've got 2 maps here with the pH, but we just show from 2016 to 2020 the grid sampling from each year with the spreading of the VR. We've evened it up pretty well, and then the same with the phosphorus. It's evened it up pretty well. We were probably doing a bit agriculturally at the start, probably wasn't quite as neat and pretty as what we're doing it now. We're sort of adjusting our speed rather than the belt speed, but now we're much more accurate in what we do. But we did pretty well, I think, so, which is good.
Excellent. And they're all 0 to 10s that you did, or did you do any deeper sampling for any of that as well? Or
now we're doing some 0 to 15 stuff.
Okay.
And we've got an acidic layer, so we're trying to see where that is, and we really don't want to do any tillage, so
trying to avoid.
Yeah, that's right. So remind you again, guys, please ask some questions. We want to make this informal and probably tailor it to your needs. So if you have some questions on your farm, anything VR, just put it in the chat there.
I guess working through some of the data on yield and protein, I see a lot of growers who sort of going down this journey of the protein and saying, well, how much of an influence will that drive my yield and vice versa? Like, how do I get my nitrogen strategy right to make sure I hit the window to build yield, as well as sort of balance out the protein and those optimum protein sort of levels? But do you see, we've seen some photos kick around just around sort of you evening up some of that protein side of things, but how much does yield still vary across the area? Like, do you get a few tons worth of yield variation based on soil type or anything like that?
Not anymore. Unless it's some physical thing like waterlogging or something silly. Apart from that, our paddocks are that even now, it's not funny. Like the paddock around my house, it's 350 hectares, and last year it all averaged within a ton to the hectare. So it did about 6 ton a week. And that's going from 2016 to now. Like 2016, we had most of our country was doing between 3 and 7 tons to the hectare a week. And the last 3 years, they've literally done, like, we've averaged about roughly 5.5 ton to the hectare the last 3 years. and they've pretty much all averaged within a tonne or maybe 2 at the most per hectare within the paddock. And pretty much our whole wheat area and canola area have all been within a tonne of each other, like, because we've just been aiming for a level for pretty much every block. It's just gotten so even. And I'll show that on the Engage a little bit when I share my phone screen.
Yeah, sure. So I guess your strategy around then, like, you obviously had variability originally, and you're like, hang on, there's an opportunity here. You obviously, so what did you sort of start off with? How many percent sort of, I guess you had tons of per hectare yield variation, as well as then protein variation, if you've obviously seen that as a trigger that you could sort of deep dive into, 5 or so years ago?
Yeah, like probably the biggest, easiest one is put is 3 years ago, 2017, we used to blend 2016, 17, 18, we blended, I don't know, well, 18 we didn't do much, but 17 and 16 we blended a fair bit of grain, and probably had, from 8 to 14% protein. The last 3 years haven't blended a ton. We can't. It's just, we don't have enough variability to blend. So it's great in one mind, but if we get it wrong, we get it all wrong now. So,
yeah, sure. And what's that? What are you targeting protein yield like? What sort of area you're in?
Ideally, we want to be around 12, 12 and a half probably is our peak. Different varieties will have a bit of a different peak, but it's just hard to. Every year's different. It's hard to know you're going to get it, but the last 3 years we've got pretty much 12 and a half each year, so we've been pretty happy with that. But they've been pretty similar finishes, so it's aim for that 12 and a half, and we're still trying to grow as much yield as possible. We're still trying to do our yield. That's the key. That's the payer. But we're just using the protein for the infield variability. So we're still using deep ends. We're still picking. So all I do, it's pretty simple now. So get a deep end test, pick my average, what I want to aim for. So say it's 4 tonne of wheat. So we need equivalent 400 kilos of urea or 200 units of N. So I just go, righto, deep N minus a tiny bit of mineralization, maybe 60 kilos or 30 units, minus anything we've put on, so manure or something, and then equals the leftovers, and that's how much urea it needs. So if we want to go 4 tonne of wheat, this year we're putting on roughly 250, 300 kilos of urea. Just all depends on what our deep N is.
Sure. Yeah, which links into Hayden's question really well, because he was asking how often or how many deep end tests are you doing to know where to start on the N applications, or are you just running off the yield and protein? So I guess on that, like, how many per paddock? Are you doing every paddock or only a few, or do you do zones? Or
at the start, we're only doing the odd block, like just trying to do, maybe 5 or 6 for the farm. But for simplicity, they're bloody $80. I just do one for every block, every paddock, pretty much. So about 30, I think we did this year. The odd paddock that we've been doing for a long time, just testing 2 areas, like a high protein and low protein. And that's been pretty interesting. But yeah, just the clarity when you just do a deep end for every paddock is just so much simpler. Knowing, right, I've got 100 units of them here to start me off. I only need 100 units to finish off to get 4 tonne a week. So, a bit of mineralization and that's it. So that works really well. And it's simple, but again, so say we needed 100 kilos of urea or 200 kilos of urea on that paddock for that year, for the 4 tonne a week. I then use my maps to do the variability. So my average rate is still 200 kilos, but areas might be getting, well, in the past areas would get 600 kilos or 50 kilos. Now it's pretty much blanket. Matt Clancy doesn't like me saying blanket anymore, but
so those areas, it's always the big question is, like, if we start pushing some of these nitrogen rates high, like, we're going to start haying off crops. Have you experienced anything like that, or is the manure like coming in at a different time, or not having control, or anything like that you're seeing?
So that probably paying off is probably where we've lost more yield in the past 30 years than being underfed, just because we've always had manure because we used to have chooks. And probably just because of our soils. But, by no means was it 18%. It wasn't a drought, but, we're always up around that sort of 12, 13. But even the last couple of years where you've got some areas that might be 12, or it's probably 13.5 to 14%, they've lost a bit of yield because they've had too much in. They've been too pumped up. So, yeah, we're really trying hard not to push anything over where we want to be. That's why when we spread manure, we minus our manure map from our urea map to counteract the nitrogen in the manure. So it's in the arse. But it's been working pretty good. So, but yeah, it's just all about trying to make sure if we get every hectare to 12.5% protein, we know that we've got the nitrogen right. Because at the end of the day, nitrogen is protein, or protein is nitrogen. That's the only measure. That's the easiest measure. So if we know we've got, at the end of the day, we're spreading urea for nitrogen, not for anything else. So if we know we've got 12.5% in that hectare, well, we know that the nitrogen was right. If it's low, we know there wasn't enough. If it's high, we know it was too much. And then from that, if we've got a big yield variation, if it's low yield and good protein, we know there's something else going on. If it's high yield and low protein, something else going on, or probably low N. And if it's, about right, well, it's fine. Probably doesn't need any further investigation. So just the performance maps with the correlations, like the 4 map colors. I don't think I've got one here, but there's high yield, low protein, low yield, low protein, high and low. It just really shows you where your low hanging fruit is, I suppose.
And in that wheat canola rotation, like how are you managing your maps on that? Like obviously, like we talk about cereals quite a lot, but in that wheat canola phase, like how are you managing that data? Like is the canola data good for you to be spreading on, or do you rely on your other cereal maps, or what?
All for the last 3 years, and we are literally back to 1 to 2 rates of urea, which means we're 1 to 2, 1.5%, I'll call it, protein across all our wheat and canola country, which I'll show you on the N gauge. That's been from wheat and canola. So it's, in easy terms, I just work on really easy numbers. So it takes a ton of wheat. A ton of wheat is 100 kilos of urea, takes to grow. And very roughly, 1 ton of wheat is 1% protein. So every percent protein we're up or down, we lose or gain a ton, around that 12.5%. So once we get to 12.5, if we go higher in protein, we probably drop off the yield. So, you got your curve.
Yeah.
So for easy numbers, if we're 1% protein difference, that's 100 kilos of urea I have to spread to fix that area or to even those areas up. So we don't do that in one pass. This year we're doing it over 2 passes, so 50 kilo variation in the maps. I'll show you later, but 50 kilos per spread. So yeah, it's pretty simple. But I'll if you want me to, I'll just show you this.
Yeah, go into it, because I mean that's always the interesting thing around. I mean, it is good taking the simple approach on a lot of these nitrogen strategies. Like it's a good base to start on, and then you can step forward. You can make it more complicated as you start learning more. But I think it's just getting confidence in. I guess it's really interesting to see where you made your starting base from and how you justify it.
Because me and Dad started to look at all this in 2017, and because everyone said, we've got to use yield protein. That's how we do it. That's how we need to do it. So we went and overlaid yield with protein and tried to make some zone maps. And we just gave up because it was too bloody hard. Like, we were spending hours staring at a paddock and getting nowhere. And then we thought, well, Dad said, why don't we just use protein? So I went and made a formula, and everyone still to this day says, yeah, but what about yield? And this is the simplest way I can put it. If you've got an area that's doing 5 tonne of yield and 12% protein, and another area in the same paddock that's doing 2 tonne yield and 8% protein, if you put yield in the equation, you go and spread the next year, because this 5 tonne area, which is 12% protein, dragged out so much more N, straight away the map's going to go and put a lot more N in that area. And on the 2 tonne area, which was low in protein, just needed some more N, it's going to stay low because it only ever gets enough to fix 2 tonne, like to replace 2 tonne. Where if you use the protein, so low protein areas get more urea, high protein areas get less, well, suddenly take out the yield. All right, this is 12% protein. It needs, let's say, 100 kilos. Oh, this is 8% protein. This needs 300 kilos. And if you had an area with 14% and 4.5 tonne, well, it's going to mine that area. Where if it's 14% and 4.5 tonne, it's going to get as much urea as the 5 tonne area, but it's going to be blown up again next year.
Yeah,
so
no, which is, again, I've now found the same, like the protein data helps you be more impartial to the soil types, which sort of leads to Hayden's question sort of coming in, which was, would you target your heavier soils or target your lighter elevated soils, say if it had limestone ridges or alike, for your deep end test to gain your best starting point, as so many paddocks have so many soil types throughout. I think this might be one from more of the South Australian sort of zone on that. We've got quite sort of patchwork quilt soils where you've got that variation. Like if you are starting out on that soil testing to get that base starting point, where would you go?
So we've got one block of Brewery, and it runs into a gravelly hill, which is sandy, gravelly stuff. No heavy country in it at all. And then you come down 200 meters off the ridge, and then it turns into black, heavy West Wyong country. So funnily enough, that's the one block we haven't spread VR yet. And funnily enough, it's the one block that's not even yet. It's canola this year, and it's the most even it's ever looked, because it's had a VR this year. So if you're just using protein, at the end of the day, we've got some stuff to show this, but at the end of the day, the protein just says, it doesn't necessarily say what is in the soil, but it says what the plant was able to get or what was available to the plant. So I've done plenty of soil tests in high and low protein areas, and the soil tests don't match up, but I'll still go and spread the map, and the soil test will still be different. But it's because there's obviously something there that's holding back the plant from getting that extra N, or it's getting more N out of that lower N area somehow. But
yeah, definitely. And you see that, like, when you're digging up plants, whatever, have sort of soil pits or cores, and you can see like the roots not going, say, like we're doing 0 to 60 deep ends, but our actual bucket of nitrogen that we can extract from might only be 40 centimeters. So we need to take that into account with some of that budgeting as well, which I think is critical. And I mean, me being from more of that soils focus as well, like looking at the protein data, it helps you just be less driven around how, stop trying to second guess the soil types. It's already told you how much nitrogen it can contribute by the results of last year. Just had another one, Broden, just coming in from Mitch here. How are you managing the amount of urea going out when your yield potential is either increasing or decreasing as the season progresses?
This is the best question. Well, they're all good, but this is a real good one. So 2020, classic example. We come off 2018-19, worst years we've ever had, pretty much. 2019 was. Coming to 2020, had a heap of summer rain, and it just kept raining. So at the start of the year, we aimed for 3 tonne a week. I'll just use wheat, but you just halve it for canola. So we aimed for 3 tonne a week. So we ordered enough urea for that. We had all our maps made. So they had, in that year, I used 30 kilo increments. So lower protein areas might have got 180 kilos, and the highest might have got 30. But every percent protein was 30 kilos. So because they were 30 kilo increments, I had to spread that 3 times to get 100 kilo difference. Well, it was 90, but close enough for me. So that was my theory on that. So, at sowing time, we're aiming for 3 tons. So we ordered enough urea for 3 ton. Came to June, kept raining. We thought, righto, let's aim for 4.5. So we got enough for 4.5. So we'd already we spread once. Or we actually didn't spread till about June, but so spread once in June, ordered more urea, we spread again. So we've spread twice. We're still only putting out our average rate. I think it was 150 kilos for the map, but areas are getting 30, areas are getting 180, and I can show you some of that stuff. And then came July, August, we said, righto, it's looking like a bumper, let's go hard, and we aimed for 6.5 ton. We spread again, and so that mean we had a 100 kilo difference. So in theory, they've evened up, but the paddock had 450 kilos, I think, average, and roughly some paddocks had 450, some paddocks had 300, but one paddock had 200 kilos in one corner and 600 kilos in another. And I thought that was going to be very interesting, but got to harvest time and they yielded within 200 kilos of each other and the same protein with 400 kilo urea difference. So that's how we do it now. So, 100 kilos, whatever you want to aim for with your average rates of spreading urea. I'm not saying go and spread shitloads of urea. I'm saying pick a number and then just use the map to do the variability. You still spread the amount of urea you want to spread, but the map's putting it where it needs to go.
Just out of interest on that, like really interesting on how you are pushing that spread so significantly. But as you are evening up the fields, are you finding, I guess, that work from like James Hunt out of BCG and stuff around the end banking, so that nitrogen bank? So are you seeing an increase in your, call it, steady state nitrogen, so that bank of nitrogen sitting in the soil, and potentially you've got better risk management by having that bank there, or are you not seeing much of a trend there of an increase in deep ends?
We didn't, so pretty much 2020 we started pushing this hard. So we did, all our wheat in 2020 would have averaged 300 kilos. 2021 it averaged probably 400 kilos, and last year it averaged probably 350. So we've gone very hard the last 3 years, and we didn't really see much last year, but this year, which is probably about right with the timing of how N works and microbes and whatever, that's beyond me. All our deep ends on all our wheat stubbles, which we know we overfed a little bit last year. Our canola we probably underdid a little bit. It's just the way the beast worked with how we got our urea. All our deep ends this year on our wheat stubbles were probably averaged 120 units. Okay. And all our canola was averaged probably 70. But the wheat ones that I know weren't right, they were low. And the canola one, there was 1 or 2 canola ones that I know we fed all right, they were pretty good. But everything else that I know, it all made sense pretty much. So
excellent.
So I think we're getting some mineralization happening now from that end banking effect. So just quickly, picture you got 3 paddocks, all the same proteins, all very similar yields. At the end of the day, that's what we're sort of working on. Sorry, not all the same protein, all the same yield, but varying protein. So we've got 10% protein, 11.5 and 13.5. So in the past, we would go and spread them differently the following year. So the one with the low protein, we might put on 120 kilos of urea if we're aiming for an average year, might put on 90 on the average protein one and maybe 30 kilos on the, just for argument's sake, on the high protein one. But this picture was the variability of the protein in those fields in those years. So you can see it's very variable.
5%.
It's more. So this is all real numbers. So this was in 2017. So we had all our similar yields but varying proteins. So then we came up with the formula of obviously, so lower protein gets higher amounts of urea. So 8.5% wheat gets 180 kilos, right up to 13.5 wheat gets 30 kilos. Bearing in mind, this is an average. So say if you wanted to put on 300 kilos of urea, well, if the average of this is 100, times that by 3, there's your one spread.
Sure.
That's how I'd work that. And same with canola, except instead of 1% protein, I use 2% because it just gets a bit of the noise out of there.
Sure.
So yeah, apply the formula. Here we get a urea maps. This is all we do now, and it's super easy on the N gauge. And then yeah, so go and spread that. So very easy. There's no bloody guesswork of this area got eaten by mice and this area got flooded out and this area got this. It's just based off the protein, the yield's taken out of it, and we go and spread because our nitrogen is, affected by the urea.
Yeah, so basically same paddock spend you'd start with, same paddock spend, but just put it where it's needed, but going by what the protein's telling us.
The one thing doing all this has made us spread a shitload more urea because now we have we have 5,000 hectares of trials, knowing that if we're at this protein, we're going to get our maximum yield. So it made us spread a lot more.
Yeah, and you see that with some of the yield data. Once you start pushing it a bit more based on the protein, you realise if you just work on replacement off yield, you're only replacing back to that yield you've capped yourself at. So it's almost like a false ceiling that you've got there if you're not using protein to work out which areas can you push forward more.
Exactly. So it just makes it simple, and it's just very easy. And I guess to chuck a little bit of science behind it, and I know we're probably chopping and changing around a bit here, but sorry if you're trying to follow, but I think it's good to just make it a bit informal and please ask questions. So it's a bit better than trying to just jam numbers down everyone's throats rather than
we've just had a good one come in. We've just had a good question come in.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so from Stephen Kathleen Arnold, we've variated since 1999, used soil test results and yield goals for building variable rate prescriptions, but moisture is our most limiting factor in production. We found out that we almost needed different maps for dry years than wet years, depending on soil types and in-season moisture. But we couldn't predict how in-season moisture was going to come or not. So by taking yield out of our goal and using protein to set up fertilizers, variable rate prescriptions makes this so much easier.
How good's that? There it is. They just summed it up. Exactly the same as us. Like moisture is our limiter. 2018-19, we averaged 2 tonne of wheat in 2018. We averaged 1 tonne in 2019. And we were stripping plenty of wheat that was 100 kilos. So moisture is our limiter. But yeah, if you have the yield in there, it's just, you're always trying to replace what you took out. But in actual fact, we're working on this year, not last year. We want to even everything up, but we want to only put on the amount that we want to grow. So, we want to leave a little bit there for end banking probably in our soils. So yeah, that I couldn't agree more. That's awesome that someone has found that out too. And
for guys like, I guess you were involved with some of the training going over to WA and through SA to New South Wales, obviously seen some different soil types. I'm sure some of those conversations is like, yeah, it's fine for you on your red loams, Broden, but what do we do on our sandy soils? Did you pick up much sort of from experience on that lap around?
Yeah, that's the number one criticism. That won't happen here. And look, I'm not saying this is going to work everywhere at all. I'll nearly bet on it. We've got a block at Monteagle. It's very sandy for our standards, not very sandy for the beach farmers over in WA. So for context, our home block is about 1.3 organic carbon %.
Yep.
That block is 0.8 or 0.7.
Yeah, right.
It's very sandy. In 2019, I chucked out 500 kilos of urea. Didn't get much rain. That didn't show up in a deep end test, so it leaches. But it's evened up by doing this, and you'll see the maps in my slides here later on. It's
So
evened up, probably the easiest.
Does that end up having, do you split your applications more there because
Yeah.
it is sandier? Do you go, so you might do
Yeah.
4 applications there or something, will you? Or
Yeah.
it'll get its third rather than just doing 2 in a.
So we might do 2 here. On a year like this, up there, we'll
Yep.
definitely do 3.
Okay.
Like what happens up there is it's because it's sandier, it's a little bit slower because it's a bit further east. If we go and lump on 200 kilos, or probably 300 kilos at once, it can wash past the roots and it won't see it till later on.
Yeah.
So if we just drip feed at 100 kilos, 150 at a time, it's just so much better for it. Where here at home, we can sort of do 2 hits. It's probably more economical and justifiable. I mean, we'll happily do 3, but if we can see where the season's going, we'll just do 2, as long as we're getting the right rains to wash it in.
Yeah, no,
but I'd happily do this stuff at sowing time. We don't do any at sowing, but I would.
Okay, so yeah, you're all in crop for your variable rate nitrogen. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
we get enough rain. So we're 600 mil rainfall. So everyone, I hate saying that because everyone goes, well, he's 600 mil rainfall. But this works. Yeah, it worked in 2017 when we had 300 mils. It's worked on the last 3 years when we've had over 1,000 mils, and I'm sure it's going to work next year if we get 200 mils.
Sure,
just won't be spreading 1,100 tonne out.
And again, it's a system approach, right? Like you're not going to balance out this whole thing in 1 year. Like you're paying, you've seen this on a journey of over the last 5 or so years, really.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I reckon if we had 2 average years, or maybe even 1, we could fix it. Like all our variability we had before. Now, knowing what I know now, we could even all our paddocks up within a year or 2.
Okay. Well,
if you're in WA on that 300 mil, 200 mil rainfall country, I would just work on. It's probably going to take 2 or 3 years to do it, because
interesting.
If you're only spreading 100 kilos of urea a year, well, I don't think you can do 100 kilos here and 50 and none there.
Yeah, it's all relative.
So split it over, do 50 kilo or 30 kilo increments. So it takes 3 years or 2 years.
So you always put something out. Have you ever put 0 out in a zone, or will you always put something somewhere?
Always now, because we just lose too much yield if we don't put it out.
Sure.
But we always used to do strip tests. Never really saw anything. Started using the protein maps. Would go and put the strip test in a low or a high area. Then we started to see everything.
Okay. Makes sense.
So, yeah. So this is some science around what we're talking about, I suppose. 2020, Eva Moffat did a trial of 1 hectare soil, like deep end soil sampling. So did 100 deep end soil tests on 100 hectares. So the top map is the sampled soil test 0 to 60 of mineral N in 2020 May 2020, and the map below is the protein map from the harvest of the 2019 wheat, which was a dry year. It got pinched off. That's why there's like 15-16%. We spread some manure there.
Yep.
And yeah, so that was the variability that there was. Then that was the map in 2020 that we used on the right there, that we used then to spread the next year in 2020, and you'll see on some maps how even that paddock's got. So yeah, that was cool because the deep ends were correlating to the protein maps, and that's what we see now a fair bit. And I will nearly bet that if they don't in some areas, I'll trust the protein map more than the deep end test.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's something to do with, it shows up in the soil test, but there's some other constraint that doesn't allow the plant to get it. So if you go and chuck a bit more on anyway, well, whatever constraint is there that's limiting that extra N to get to the plant, because you've put more on because the protein map said so, what's it matter about the restraint? Still get the N, So,
and I guess you're obviously pretty confident in the calibration, obviously at the start of the year on your crop scan. Like we just had a question come in from Clinton here, just saying, does the protein data need cleaning, as in calibrating with what's actually coming off the paddock? How do you go about that sort of process?
So I just calibrate ours once in wheat, once in canola each year. So the first truckload of each crop. And then I don't touch it after that. So differing varieties of wheat and, differing conditions, like if it gets shot and sprung, the protein will change a little bit, and, the machine might be a couple 0.3% or 0.2% difference, but I don't change it because I want our paddocks to show the variability. So if I go and change it through the year or through harvest, well, I'm fixing my variability on the map. So
and you've obviously had a pretty good result with that. Like, so when you get to the end of a paddock, if you're saying you're pulling in 12.5% average, when you're delivering it, it's going in plus or minus like 12.5 plus or minus 0.3 kind of thing.
Worst case scenario. Yep. 9 times out of 10, we're 0.1, 0.2.
Okay.
Off.
Yeah.
Like
right.
The last 3 years we've delivered wheat, and we've been running on the limit for segregations a lot of the time, and we've had probably 2 or 3 trucks rejected out of however many hundred. So
okay, excellent.
So the N gauge, I'll show you on the phone. It'll be nicer if I do a live demo, but the one thing I wanted to show was this. So this is 2017. So there's 3 blocks. Obviously this block here was the one I just showed you with the deep end testing. So 2017, this was, I've got to remember, it would have been canola. Is that right? No, sorry. No, these are all wheat, all wheat paddocks. Sorry. So that's, but remember, all these wheat paddocks have been spread off canola proteins.
Okay, so you use the canola protein data going into the wheat.
Into the next wheat. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So remember that. So 2017 wheat were pretty variable. My things my pages cut the thing off, but each color is 1% protein. Every color, it's all calibrated, right? So every map you're looking at, every color is 1% protein difference.
Yep.
So we had a fair bit of protein variation in 17, 19. 19 we even it up a little bit because we had 1 variable rate in 2018, and then we obviously had some dry years. This block actually yielded all right, but then 2021 after 2020 we pretty much fixed it. 2018, 2020 and 2022 on this block, exactly the same story. The only difference here on the right hand side in 2020 is that's just a different variety of wheat, so the protein's just different. And 2017 on this G1, exactly the same again. So in 3 years we've gone from 1, 2, 3, 4% protein variation down to 2, or
wow,
1.
Yeah, going from what's that about 40 to 50% of your field in your desirable range up to 80 to 90% in that. And the
biggest thing is, in this year here, this green area was doing 6 ton of wheat, and this area here was doing 3 ton of wheat.
Yeah, okay. Wow.
This year here, all this did 6.5.
So all pretty even on yield. So the yield was staying the same as well as the protein. Okay.
Yeah, yield was doing the same thing. Yeah.
Because obviously, we have some people who have, I guess, soil types that do vary a bit more, and the actual yield potential varies. So they'll be trying to match yield vary. It might be a 1 ton and a 2 ton or 3 ton area in one field, and trying to manage that protein across that as well.
Yeah, that's right. So what I'll do now is just show you. I'll share my screen.
So this is sort of going on a journey on how you're creating your variable rate maps.
Yeah, you're happy to do that?
Yeah.
So can you see my screen? Can you?
I can. Yeah, can see your music taste and all.
Yeah, sweet. So crop scan, which is obviously Australian owned, Broden made, we made this app. Well, they made this app with Ed and myself tagging along to help a little bit. So you can still hear me, can't you?
Yep, still going.
Yeah,
Still see where you go.
Just my laptop's frozen, but anyway. So yeah, we made this app called Engage, and the whole thinking around this was making variable rate maps is so painful and just near impossible. So we set out to make an app that we could develop and use or make variable rate maps quick and easy in the field, not have to go back to a computer and do it. And the whole aim is to get the farmer to be doing it, not just anyone else or not some other company. I mean, still by all means get some other company to help and do it, and there's still a fit for them to make some more integral maps. But for the broad acre, quick, fast, simple, just a protein urea map, let's find an app to make an app to do it. So yeah, look, I've been making gypsum maps with this in summertime. That's actually based off the yield, because our yield was affected by some waterlogging in that year. But this is the app. So I just wanted to show you, like, this is another paddock. So this was actually, if I go to that one, there. So that was 2018 protein in that paddock.
Yep.
Then if we go to 2020 protein, we see we even up a bit. Obviously, we had a few extra headers. That doesn't sort of worry me too much. That's still enough data for me to make maps. So you can see we've evened up a bit there. I'll leave that out. But then we get to 20. Well, that's the. No, that won't work. There's just some. Oh, this is the 2022 yield map for this paddock. So the legend looks big, but realistically, we've got 90% of our yield from 6.5 ton to 7.5 ton.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's some other. So that was the protein in that year too. But bearing in mind, did I have that on here?
What did your rainfall vary between 2017 and 2021?
So 2017, I think we had 400 mils or something.
Yeah, okay.
And 2021 was 1,000.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So
bit of a step up.
Yeah, and it's the big years are the hard ones, because lodging is probably our biggest issue in the big years. Not much else. But yeah, so if I want to go make a map, I haven't actually made one for this paddock yet. So we go to our protein. So there's our protein layer. There's our legend on the left-hand side. So, yep, we're 2% variation. So I hit the plus. I'll just make a grid map, so you can do grid or contour. You preset some of these things, but so crop type, it's in wheat this year. It's in, we're going to go agri spread spreader. We're going to spread urea. All these things you pre-populate, so it's a bit easier. Tell me if I'm going too fast, Ed.
No, you're going right.
And one of the best features is AB line. So this will make the grids lining up with the AB line. Hit next, create. We'll wait a minute or so, and that'll make a map. So we'll come back to him. Can do this with, say, yield protein. So we can do the same thing with the yield map. Let's go contour. It's wheat.
So once you've finished a field at harvest time, you can basically start creating your prescription zones, whether it's gypsum, lime, urea.
Yep. So the map that's getting created is just down here in the grey. It'll, just depending on how big and how many plot or points there are, is how long it'll take. Paddock like this should only take a minute or so. You can just hit the refresh, but the beauty of it is you can just go to the next one. So we did that one, so it's loading there. But I just go around and make some. So These are some older ones. There's a contour one. So, if I wanted to make this contour one a actual, I can just go edit layer. So here's all my proteins. So I'll just have a look here again. So it's orange and yellow. So, let's put 150 here. Let's put, let's go 200 here, 250, 300. And if there's no points there, you don't actually have to put it. Let's go 100. Let's go 50. Now, the beauty of this app is, say, for instance, I knew that this point here wasn't actually meant to be that, like it was waterlogged or something odd happened there and you wanted to change it, just hit that green button there, or say that piece there was not right and we wanted to make that. Oops. What did you say about live demos?
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll make it that one. Might change. I reckon it will when I get out of it anyway. Go red, hit save. So that'll load. And it'll become urea, so it'll show you your rates on the left and your percentages and the change. So there's my urea map. I'll show you this, but I'll go into it in a sec. So I push export to John Deere, and I'll show you in a second how easy that is. So let's just go back to this one because I've actually got to spread this in a couple of weeks. So I'll actually make a map. So there's
just while you are talking on that, Broden, we just had a question
Yep.
come in. Just the application timing of urea. Obviously, rainfall events play a key part, but do you have a ballpark time in crop stages that you prefer to spread on? And we tend to work on a couple of passes, possibly 3 if the season is kind.
Yeah, that's yep. So this is the hardest part, the crop stage dilemma. So this year, for instance, we've got a full profile, but spring's looking tight, the outlook. So we get frosted really easy. So we don't want to have our wheat pumped up early and then get frosted and have moisture to finish, but we'll get frosted. So with wheat, kind of this year we're going to let it suffer a little bit early and then come and hit it just at the end of tillering.
Okay.
I don't want too big. Last year and the year before, I pretty much had an aim, because we're aiming for 6.5, 7 ton crops. I just had the mentality, I don't want this to look yellow at all. Like I want it to be John Deere green all year. So that's what we did and it worked. So we still didn't spread our first stuff till end of June, start of July. And then right up until just before flag leaf. We just do it before crop damage, pretty much.
Yeah, okay. Yep.
We don't want to run over anything. But yeah, in a dry year like this, we're just going to hold off until the end of tillering, probably give it 100 kilos, and then say they need 250. We might come back at right on just before flag leaf maybe and do another one. Because at the moment we're just aiming for about 4.5 ton of wheat. So we don't want to put too many tillers there to blow it up.
Sure. Makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's our map there on the screen.
Yeah.
And sorry for anyone who's just listening and not watching, but this is recorded, so we'll get it out there. So we push and hold on our zone, edit layer. I'm just going to work on 100 kilo average rate for this because I'm probably only going to do 100 kilos at a time with the wheat. Or I might do, I don't know. This is the beauty of having it on your phone. You can just decide as you go. So we'll do the orange at 150. We'll go on 50 kilos. So we'll go 100. So 50 and 0. We'll go 200 Now we will implement some. We're going to get some formula stuff into this, so you can just sort of hit protein by, protein by urea, and you'll just hit a button and it'll sort of fill those out itself. But that's sort of coming in the future.
Or in the
So
pipeline.
in the pipeline. So if I hit edit zones, I won't do it, but what we can do is use this picker and we can select there. And if we wanted to make a trial in there, we can. You can select individual cells, or you can use this one and select a whole bunch. Works awesome. I've been making gypsum maps with this, and it's just so bloody simple and quick and easy. So hit save. We're done. Just hit refresh, and then there's our rates. So how much urea do we need to spread? If we hit that again, and we hit this little page button up here, and we go fertilizer up the top, and that paddock was called M1. So if we M3, sorry, we scroll down to M3, there it is there, average rate 131 kilos, 9 ton urea. There's the totals down the bottom. There's a heap of stuff in here that probably shouldn't be in here. We've been testing, but yeah, simple as that. So
No, excellent. So simple reporting on the back end of creating those maps.
Yeah. And so, righto, so I just saw that question in the thing, Josh. Here's how easy it is. It's really easy with My John Deere, this app now. So push and hold.
So looking at, sorry, keep going.
Export to My John Deere.
And we can also export to the CNHI platforms currently too, and working on APIs with other machinery platforms as well. But CNHI and the John Deere Ob Center are the two APIs currently.
Yep. And as quick as I can, I know where I was a bit slow getting in there, but I've tested it. By the time I push send and jump into here as quick as I can, it's already in here. So I go on the plan.
Sorry, I distracted you on your flow.
We're good. Push the plus. We scroll down to M3. M3. Hit next. Tank mix or product. We're going to call it urea. I've got heaps in here, so don't take notice of that. RX assigned prescription. Hit the little RX. M3 urea, and actually I think in the future John Deere will have the legend come up on the right hand side there.
Yeah, okay.
There's our map. There's our one we made earlier for Bender 1.
Yep.
Let's go this, because this will be an actual. Hit save again, save again. There it is there. If you want to add some AB lines, whatever. Hit that, send, 340R, next, send. Within 1 minute, that'll be in the tractor, ready to spread. And that's as simple as it is. And it just, like, I'm not trying to sell anyone anything, but this is, well, we developed it. So, CropScan and me and Ed and and Matt Clancy, the biggest one. We all developed it from feedback from farmers. I sort of have a fair bit to do with how it looks. So if you don't like how it looks and works, sorry. But farmer built, farmer input, it just is simple, flows really easy, and the easiest way to make maps then and there. Obviously there's a cost, but always is. I don't know if you want to tell them the cost, but
and I think the biggest thing's been just around the issue of all this data being collected and just still sitting on the header, whether it's yield, protein, whatever. It's just really hampered by not actually utilizing that harvest data. And when I'm talking with growers, it's sort of looking at harvest being the start of your season starts with your harvest data, because that's setting you up for next year. So making sure that's good, intact, and utilized is a critical piece.
So Trav, hello Trav. I I know, Travis. To change the grid size, he asked to change the grid size of the grid cells on the maps. It's referenced off the width of your machine. So if you have a 36 meter spreader, you put in 36 meters, that'll make a 36 by 36 grid. So if you are spreading gypsum and want to make them 12 meters, which I don't, because it becomes a lot of data, like a lot of pixels, you can go 12 meters, you can go 500 meters, you can go whatever you want. So that's all within your width. So whatever you change your width on your machines in the settings tab here. So if I go to the settings tab and go implements, there's all my implements. If I want to add a new one, so if I go add, call it whatever, sprayer, spreader, boom spray, and then you just put your width in, so 80 meters, save. So that'll make 80 meter cells. So yeah, pretty simple and easy. Yeah, and works good. If you do a contour, obviously a contour map, it's just contours.
Yeah, the smooth lines.
Yep. So there's a gypsum map that I made this summer. So I just went and got, so at the moment we need a protein or a yield data in there to make a map. So I just got the moisture map, made it all one color, and then just made some polygons with
zoned it out.
My drawings.
Yeah.
But if in the future in the pipeline we will have it so you can do a blank canvas, make your own whatever you want to do, or bring in shape files and then edit them. So if you've got previous soil tests or something, you can use that. But yeah, so it's just bloody changed my life. I hope it can continue and keep pushing forward, which I think it will, and I hope the adoption's pretty good. But it just goes. No, it changes the game for spreading variable rate, I think, because we don't have to no longer sit at a computer.
No, definitely. I think, Holland, the tools that are making your journey easier is excellent, but it's actually really good seeing that whole sort of start to finish on where your journey's come from and how you have had to crunch through, working through your own numbers, get confidence in your own system, and then realizing it can be a relatively simple process is, pretty neat to sort of see it live, from how you're approaching it. So really appreciate your time on that.
Just show you. So here's one I made yesterday. Well, I made it ages ago, but we didn't put any manure in this green strip down. The green strip there. So I just went and made that a really high rate. So that's the map. If I go to my John Deere and click here, and it should load. That's that's to be applied. But if I go to the real data, that was the as applied map for that paddock, and it bloody matches perfect. So
no, excellent. If any final questions, feel free to put them in the chat, but I'm conscious of time and everyone's busy days, and hopefully everyone's just listening while they're still multitasking like we're all good at doing. But really appreciate your time, Broden, and sharing your journey and being sort of quite open on how you've come along on this variable rate journey in general, from phosphorus, gypsum, lime, and now really honing in on that variable rate nitrogen. And I think it's super exciting just seeing how fields can be evened up from that protein perspective, because when we see even protein, it means we really have maximized sort of that input that we do have some control over to some degree, being the nitrogen component, and matching that in with that moisture availability. So really appreciate that.
No, exactly. No, thank you very much. And any other questions? I'm happy to hang around a little bit, but if people want to get going, by all means, just start signing out.
Definitely not. Thank you everyone for joining here today, and really appreciate again Broden for sharing all his insights, and thank you all for being online to listen to them, and we'll be sharing the recording out in future. So thank you all.
Thank you for joining us, and find more CropScan tutorial videos at our website www.cropscanag.com.